Awesome. Well, welcome to Let's Cool One with Jack Macklin. Today we have a very special guest, Ryan Bills.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, tenor saxophonist. Um, yeah, where are you from, Ryan?
I'm from the Detroit area. I grew up in Royal Oak, Michigan.
Right, and moved to Chicago, what, couple?
I moved to Chicago to Illinois about a year ago to wrap up my graduate degree at Northern Illinois University. But I moved to Chicago about a month ago.
Oh, sweet, sweet. Yeah, right around when I got back here. Um, cool. I thought there's no other way to introduce Ryan than a tune. So I think we're going to play a tune for you guys.
What you thinking?
You want to try that Punjab?
Yeah.
All right, let's try that Punjab. All right. One, two, one, two, three. Nice, man. Nice.
Yeah, man. Pleasure.
That's some good stuff. Joe Henderson, Punjab. I think we're both big fans of Joe Henderson here.
I've been known to enjoy a Joe Henderson record.
Yeah. Well, what's your favorite Joe Henderson record?
Oh man, you're asking me to pick my my child.
Yeah, right. What are some ones that you love to check out?
Well, I definitely say In and Out. I mean,
right,
you know,
Out and In.
Out and In, Blues and F.
Yeah.
That record's really important to me. I think early on, I don't know why, but right when I was getting way into Joe, Mode for Joe was the one that like I seemed to attach myself to, and I kind of find myself coming back to that record through the years, and I not entirely sure what it is, but especially recently, there's something about Joe Chambers' ride cymbal on that record, just bang, 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 dang, 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 bang. It's there's so much life just in the sound of that ride cymbal and in the power of just like the pure chord note of it. I mean, I love Elvin and how open he is on In and Out and on Inner Urge especially. But then I really have been finding I like hearing Joe with drummers that like really push that chord note, kind of like the next evolution of the Jimmy Cobb sort of thing.
Right. Totally. Like that the Wynton Kelly plus Joe Henderson stuff with Jimmy Cobb.
Oh, it's the
there.
best.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
yeah, they play the kicker on there, right?
I think that isn't it just standards?
I think they play the kicker on there. I think they play 4.
They definitely play 4.
They definitely play 4. They play
the On the Trail off
On the
that
Trail.
is like,
Yeah. Dee boop, booba dee boop, booba dee bee boop, bee boop, pa 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 pa. Yeah.
I mean, that's it. And I feel like you can hear like Joe really writing in that song for that kind of a sound.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
It's like part of the tune.
Yeah. I know that one mostly from the Grant Green recording with Joe.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, where Grant Green does it, and it's like I mean, that tune sounds like it's written for Grant Green and Joe Henderson, which is like one of the best like saxophone guitar combinations I feel like out there is Grant Green and Joe Henderson. I mean, they have that record. It's Grant's record. It's Idle Moments.
Idle Moments is a big one for me too.
Yeah.
I remember I actually checked that out from the library in my hometown. Like,
really?
As I was getting into the music, I would go to the library all the time and just check out like 8 records at a time. In hindsight, I probably should have checked out 1 record at a time.
Yeah.
But like there was some records that I remember looking at it like, oh, this is cool. Joe Henderson. I knew who Joe Henderson was. Let me check this out, and like just the vibe of that record, and especially the Jean DeFleur.
Oh yeah,
that tune off of there has always like impacted me.
Da, 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 da.
Yeah. And I feel like in my own
yeah, okay, go ahead.
I think in my own like writing, when I like look at what I'm going after artistically, a lot of it is coming from that.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of energetic and in light fusing of like of bebop with this kind of a post bop thing, and
Right.
in a really really striking melodies.
Yeah.
You know, I think what really grabs me about a lot of the music of that time is how powerful the melodic content is.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe and Grant were some of like the original post bop guys, you know, same with McCoy.
Yeah.
You know, you get that record, from 67 was it, with the real McCoy with Joe on there?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and
Untouchable.
that's like, you know, like post bop at its finest right there.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and that's some of like some OG shit, for lack of better terms.
Yeah, I mean, amen.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. That shit's so beautiful. But we brought up the what was it? The Joe Henderson plus Wynton Kelly trio.
Yeah.
And I forget what year that was. It's probably
it's late 60s.
Yeah, it's late 60s. But isn't it is Paul Chambers on there, right?
Yeah, it's the Miles rhythm section.
Yeah,
right.
right. So a little closer to the mic. Okay. Yeah, let's go a little closer to the mic right here.
No problem.
Anyway, so I was gonna say, yeah, Chambers died in like 68, so it had to be before then. And I know that's the same rhythm section as the Smoking at the Half Note with Wes.
Right.
You know, which is honestly pretty incredible to hear, because I mean, everyone wanted to play with those guys. It just kind of goes to a testament how like
absolutely
how everyone like Wynton Kelly, Jimmy Cobb, and Paul Chambers were just the best of the top of the business at that point. You know.
Oh yeah, well, and you know, it's kind of a testament to how fundamental Miles Davis himself was in like putting together these bands and really establishing the sound of what was to come. I think it's really interesting to listen to that trio on the Miles Davis Live at the Black Hawk recording with Hake Mobley, because they're so tipping, you know, and there's like such a specific dynamic going on there that kind of is exactly what we're talking about, and kind of is the sort of direct predecessor to certainly the second quintet, like Tony and Ron, but also like Joe Chambers and Ron on Mode for Joe. And I think part of what I find so fascinating about that is like it's a very different vibe to what we consider the first great quintet with Philly Joe and Paul Chambers, where to me that has much more of a right down the middle sound, which is also beautiful. So it's interesting that Miles, towards the end of that group, kind of transitioned away from, you know, Philly and his just like right down the middle kind of a thing.
Yeah.
To Jimmy Cobb.
Yeah, I mean, with Wynton, most people still kind of classify that Wynton and Jimmy Cobb and Paul Chambers group as the first quintet still, don't they?
Yeah, they do, and I've always found that interesting because it's such a different sound.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the only thing the same is Paul Chambers, pretty much.
Right.
You know, he's the only guy that's the same, but there's a new Coltrane's not in it anymore. Jimmy Cobb brings a whole different sound, even though you could obviously tell he's pulling a lot of stuff from Philly. Yeah. And I don't know if you read the Miles biography, but like he would always tell his drummers to play that Philly shit, you know,
right,
in his stuff. So I think that, I mean, but that Live at the Black Hawk is particularly interesting because you can. I feel like you could tell Jimmy like kind of trying to get away from some of that Philly stuff, but also like also having hints of it at some times. But yeah, it's like they're kind of coming into their own as a rhythm section, kind of really being mentored by all that whole Miles lineage thing. And that was like 61, I think, is like 61, there, 62, that Black Hawk Live at the Black Hawk recording is, which is amazing. So anyway, back to Joe. So is Joe your number one guy?
I mean, how can you pick, right? I mean, I definitely have found pretty consistently over the years that I tend to gravitate to Sonny Rollins, Joe Henderson, and John Coltrane as my top three guys, right? You know, and to put it in a box like that writes off so many other, like, for example, like recently I've been really getting deep on the Clifford Jordan thing.
Oh yeah.
You know, and like
Dude, he's a badass.
he's a motherfucker,
Have
man.
you,
And
his record with Kenny Dorham,
yeah,
where they play like
he's got confirmation in anthropology on it, right?
yeah. I'm thinking it starts off with like a tune something Sunset on the record.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the name of it. Man, I'm not gonna like myself later for this, but it's a beautiful record. Yeah, Clifford Jordan is a bad dude, and there's that other record that's like it's like a black circle with his name written kind of weird in it, Clifford Jordan.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know who actually turned me on to him was Joel.
Joel Fromm.
Yeah. We played a gig and he's like, "Oh man, you need to check out these Clifford Jordan records." And
That's
I was
awesome.
like, "Oh damn."
We just actually, when he was in town last week.
Yeah.
got to hang a little
Ryan
bit.
and I actually ran into each other, seeing him at the Green Mill.
Yeah.
What'd you think of that show, man? That was killing.
Oh, it was great. I mean, that rhythm section of Reggie Thomas, Dennis Carroll, George Flutis is probably one of the best rhythm sections in Chicago right now.
Yeah, it just in the world, I'd say.
I
know?
mean, man,
Holy
yeah,
shit, you know?
Yeah, no kidding. And like something about like a rhythm section like that that's so receptive. I mean, Flutis is just like so versed in the language and really has that thing. And this is kind of what I was thinking about when we were playing just now and we're talking about these records, is there's that thing that the great musicians have and that I think that we're trying to get at, which is this real urgency and this real intensity, but not melodrama in their playing.
Right.
Which is this, you know, there's a famous anecdote of Elvin Jones. Someone asked him how he played with Train, and he said, "You gotta be willing to die with the motherfucker."
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot, and I bring that up to say that, like, you know, Flutus has that fucking intensity,
Yeah.
and then Dennis Carroll is this like wide open, this like ready to go at a moment's notice in any direction. There's nothing contrived there, and Reggie Thomas is just also wide open, but so deeply versed in the blues and tradition of basically Black American music from the beginning to now. From Early Stride to Mary Lou Williams to Stevie Wonder. It's all in there, know, which just creates this. It's about as perfect of a rhythm section as you can have.
Right. I just had, Joel and Eric Jacobson was the leader of that group. Fantastic trumpet player. He had great compositions and stuff. But I really enjoyed listening to Joel, enjoyed listening to him too. But it was pretty obvious when the trio started playing, when Reggie started playing or Dennis or whatever, it just kind of broke down to them that they had like years and years of connection, and it felt like Dennis is one of my favorite bass players of all time. Like I've listened to him. He's one of my mentors from DePaul, and I've listened to basically all his records he's recorded on. I mean, all the ones with Bobby,
Yeah.
But it just seemed like when he's playing, he is thinking like 10 notes ahead, 10 whatever ahead of everybody else, but also like willing to change what he's doing on like just
there's no
whenever.
selfishness there.
No selfishness at all, but equally as serious. And it's just like I don't know, when he's playing with George, it's just kind of, he could tell that he's just
it's a relationship.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what's so special about this music is that it is a music of relationships. I mean, I suppose all music is, but jazz music especially is communal, and it is this thing where I think when we're all in a family together as people in the music scene and of people that love the music. And within that, there's like these rings of friendship and, this kind of familial thing that's super, super deep, on and off the bandstand. And I think, the social aspect of this music has always really appealed to me. And that's why I think stops a lot of people from really, really taking that plunge is there's a hesitancy to get involved, not just in the music, but with the community of the music, which I think from its inception has been the point.
Yeah. Absolutely that's why, if you think about it, like why it started, it was because it was a celebration of when people got to get together, and like music just kind of came out of that because people were so thrilled to be around each other celebrating. I mean, you know, this music definitely has like a harsh history and a really joyous history, right? With how people were treated, especially in the 60s, and all like the musicians that we know and love, how they were not necessarily treated fairly. But like as we approach 2025 almost in a couple years, the music is totally different than it was 60, 65 years ago. You know?
I kind of push back on that because it's different and it's the same.
The community of the music is different.
The community, definitely the community of the music is different. But I think that those core things, you know, that the outside of the aesthetic elements of the music, which might be instrumentation or, you know, some stylistic things. I think that there are some core things that are hard, and it's maybe hard to pin down, that bring all of this together and have since the beginning. You know, back to Congo Square and Louis Armstrong, and further back to, you know, spirituals and folk music, and I'm sure all the way back to Africa. Right. You know, and maybe it's as good a time as any to say that this is a Black American music. Right.
100% Black American music.
You know, and we sit as respectful, in my opinion, we sit as respectful guests kind of in the halls of that.
Right. I love that Nicholas Payton quote that he uses to describe Black American music. He's like, you don't have to be Chinese to enjoy a noodle, meaning that, like, you know, noodles are meant for everyone to enjoy, but they're obviously like a Chinese thing or whatever. I'm not sure if it was exactly Chinese or Japan, but like, you know, just like this music, it's like you don't have to be Black to necessarily play it or respect it, right? But knowing where it came from and knowing its history and tradition. And have you ever been to Congo Square?
No, I've been to New Orleans just once, and I didn't get to make it out. It was like a family thing. So.
Yeah, I went to New Orleans for the first time in March of this year, and I went to was when I was living in Nashville, and I was like, shit, I've never been to New Orleans. Like, I'm just gonna drive down there, and so I did. I just hopped in my car and I drove down there, and I stayed like 4 days. Yeah. And I got an Airbnb, and it was like, honestly, one of the coolest experiences of my life, because, I mean, you know, you said you were visited, but New Orleans is such a cool place because, like, there's so many families there. Like, you know, you don't even realize how many killing musicians are there, just because, like, playing music at such a high level is just a part of the community. Right. You know how, like, here it's like part of the community to just like jump in the lake, you know, or whatever. It's just like part of the community in New Orleans to play music, you know, and it's just like people don't really talk about it like that, or like they don't really like. I mean, obviously, some of the people who are fans of the music know everybody in that community. Yeah, you know, I like went to the Maple Leaf Bar, and I was just talking to some random fan. We were seeing George Porter Jr. from the Meters, the original bass player from the Meters.
No kidding.
Yeah, and it was amazing. But I was just talking to some random guy at the bar who was a fan of George Porter, and I was talking about how I was visiting New Orleans and how I'm a fan of like people like Nick Payton, like Ashlyn Parker, like what Marsalis is, obviously the Baptiste. I saw John Baptiste's cousin play at just a random show at this bar. And he was just like, yeah, I know all those guys. Like, all those guys have like a killing family of musicians. It's not just them. It's like they have a whole family, and their brothers, siblings, cousins, parents all play and are really like badasses at that music. And anyway, bring it back to Congo Square. You were talking about like going to Congo Square and actually like stepping feet, like just being there and like understanding the vibe around it, and like reading all the signs and taking a little tour or whatever, having some guy explain what's going on there to you. It just obviously, as musicians, we know Congo Square, for people who don't know, is like the originating birthplace of modern music and modern rhythms. It's like the place where the slaves at the time, they could only play, I think they can only play music for like an hour or two on Sundays every week in this specific part in New Orleans. And it was like once a week they were given their instruments, or once a week they were allowed to make noise, basically.
Right.
And it's like, and it was a celebration as well as I think a marketplace. They were selling goods there. And it was like this whole thing of what we're talking about as a community, how that aspect of it hasn't changed. It's where people come together and, you know, celebrate and dance and like have a good time. But Congo Square is the originating place of this music that we know and love. We call it jazz, call it BAM, whatever you want to call it.
Well, it's like a mixing of all these different elements of the African
diaspora. Yeah.
You know, like coming together. You know, and there could be a whole other podcast, right, about the history of like how and why these things happened. But yeah, like you said with modern rhythm, I mean, it's all these elements are coming together, and all these different cultures, and you know, we kind of think of Africa as this one place, but Africa is gigantic, you know, and I mean, I think part of the crime of like the horror of the African slave trade and what Europeans did is they like took this place that was gigantic and like multicultural and stripped everything away from that and turned it into this one thing. And so, you know, part of that pot was all these people who had their culture completely ripped out of their hands, bringing what they had left together, and, you know, that thing kind of coming together to form what you're talking about, which is basically the origin of modern popular rhythmic vocabulary.
Right.
You know, and I think what you could take that even further to say that all modern popular music owes a huge, if it has a drum set, it owes a debt to Congo Square and the African diaspora. Like,
100%. I mean, that's the birthplace of all modern music. And some people have a hard time admitting that, which I feel like is crazy, you know, like knowing that
well, that's
like,
also a whole other conversation, is that this idea that being thoughtful and, you know, maybe accountable isn't the right word, but being thoughtful and really trying to understand and unpack the context of how things happened and why the world looks the way it does today. You know, that can be a pretty painful, somewhat inward experience, because you have to take stock for things that, of course, you didn't do, but, you know, context is context. Things happen for a reason, and I think that there's a hesitancy in people to acknowledge the more painful realities of history, because, you know, we feel that like, oh, it reflects poorly on us. I disagree. I think where it reflects poorly on us is refusing to think about this stuff. Totally.
I was mentioning that because I definitely have seen like my fair share of like Facebook fights or whatever, where someone's like, you know, like just a casual post of like, oh, just thanking black music or whatever, or like every music, rock is black music, hip hop is black music, just going down or whatever. And then some people argue, they're like, no, rock's not black music. Like rock was invented by the Beatles, you know, or some shit like that, you know. And it's like, it's laughing now because like, I mean, if you're not informed and you just like know music at a surface level, it's like, how would you not know that the rock was invented by the Beatles? You read like a Beatles history book, it says rock's invented by the Beatles in that book, you know?
Right.
But so it's like taking this to a deeper level is
well, and it speaks to how personal music and art is, and and how in some ways that is an illusion, and in some ways it's not, you know, because I think people do get really defensive about this stuff, and what they're saying is, you know, or it's like this feeling of by actually taking account of where this came from, you're taking this away from me. Like, say I'm a boomer, right? And the music of my generation was the Beatles. Well, you feel ownership of that thing. You know, and so to even suggest that that's coming out of something else or could be derivative of something else. It's like, oh, you're taking this from me. I think what's interesting about, what we're doing in kind of devoting ourselves to this, to Black American music, to music that I think that we both are acknowledging from the outset does not belong to us.
Right.
We are kind of, we took our shoes off at the door and said, hey, we're coming in here as guests to be a part of this thing that's bigger than us.
Yeah.
And what I hope about that is that it gives us the perspective to be critical of ourselves and of, our culture and of our history and of everything, and to really kind of come out of this process of becoming better and more deeply informed jazz musicians as
Right.
better and more deeply informed human beings.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. Like I do not, I don't own the music or anything like that, and I'm so grateful for everyone who's kind of like welcomed us into the community too, because
Totally.
there's so many people that have, showed us the way, or like not. I mean, we're still learning. I think that's like one of the biggest parts is that we're still learning how to navigate this. And it's like, this brings me to another point, but I feel like, this career of being a jazz musician is so funny because it's the only career where you can be 40 and still be a young lion, you know? And I feel like that's funny because, I'm 25. Are you 25?
I'm 26.
26. Okay. So it's like we're relatively young and relatively in the beginning of our career as a musician, pretty in the beginning, if we're not in the beginning than we were a year ago. So it's like, so we have still a ton to learn, a ton to grow, like a huge, so much room to grow. But all the musicians that have showed me the way, like your mentors, Reggie Thomas, Bobby Broom, mine, like Dana Hall, Dennis Carroll, Scott Hesse, Larry Brown Jr. I took lessons with him throughout high school. And all the people in the community above and beyond school too, like just the people who know and love the music, and like something that I've always heard from Mike Elamana.
Yeah, I don't know him personally, but I know
he
of
taught
him.
one of my classes at DePaul, but he played with Von Freeman for 15 years or something
that's how
like
I
that.
know about him.
Yeah. But I mean, same with him. Like he's a white guy from the suburbs, just like me, and he obviously loved the music just like I do, and it's so cool to see how someone like Vaughn, who's directly related to the lineage of the music, like brought him in and was so nice to him and like showed him the way. And I feel like for any young musician out there who's listening to this or thinking about even pursuing jazz as a career, it's like there's always going to be a spot for you as long as you're willing to learn and willing to stay humble and willing to acknowledge all the other people that have came before you. And I know it takes a lot of time and humility to kind of get there, but there's room for all of us. And I think that's the most encouraging part of being this is like the world needs more musicians. Like I know there's not enough gigs sometimes to go around, but that's kind of on us, making gig. I mean, sometimes not.
Well,
sometimes
there's a lot that goes into that, but I understand your point.
Yeah, like gigs can be hustled. Like that's a thing, Obviously, there should be more gigs that can be hustled. But
I think it's telling that when the AACM was created, or maybe it was the Art Ensemble, one of those like Chicago music collectives. And this was in the late 60s. One of their founding tenets, they had like 14 founding tenets, was, to cultivate a better relationship between booking managers and musicians. You know, so this shit goes back a long time.
Yeah.
But to what you're talking about, it kind of made me think of two things that I think maybe I'd like to, bring up and see what you're thinking.
Yeah.
What you think of. But like, the first thought is that when I think about mentors or older people, and when I think about not just mentors but like the people that play at the highest level, and we're talking about Joel or Reggie or Bobby, those people that have really are playing at that level are often very nice and welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and in terms of this idea of people who are, or who, you know, there's this fear as young musicians that, you know, people are going to be mean or gatekeepy or whatever. You know, have found overwhelmingly in my experience, the people that are mean or vibey or whatever are not the best musicians.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're often very good musicians,
Right.
but the real cats who like have really who are really playing at those high levels are almost uniformly beautiful people.
Right.
Who are really comfortable with themselves and really open and welcoming.
Definitely.
To younger musicians.
I've heard, I mean, one specific great musician comes to mind that I've heard mixed opinions on, but I've never met this person in person to give an exact opinion. But I've heard Ron Carter can be a little either like be a little mean,
Right.
be a little not mean. But I've never met this guy in person, and there can be a billion legends. I think one guy told me a story about how he like saw Ron Carter after a show and was like, you know, that was amazing or that was awesome. And Ron kind of just looks at him. He's like, yeah. And just like walks away or something like that. And it's like, I like that story could have been blown out of proportion. But
Yeah.
like, if you watch, I mean, my thing is that like, you know, it also is generational too. It's like some of these older musicians like Ron Carter, who's, you know, probably at the oldest generation he's going to get, you know, where his peers are dying off, you know, which is kind of a shame, but it is. It's true.
It's just how it happens.
It just,
you know.
just as a fact of life. But he also from Eric Reed. Do you know Eric Reed?
Not personally. No.
He's a pianist. I met him once, but one of my buddies who I was playing with a bunch in Nashville, Rob Linton, Eric Reed was one of his mentors, and he was always was playing gigs with Ron and stuff like that, and he would always say how he had such terrible experiences like learning on the bandstand, you know, with some of those guys, to where like, you know, some of these guys just love the music so much that sometimes they don't understand how to be chill.
Well,
you
totally.
know?
And like, so I've had some similar experiences with band leaders, you know, and I've been yelled at on stage and and such. But again, it's always so apparent when it's coming from a place of, oh, this person just is so in it, you know, and they're so in the music, and for whatever reason, you know, it's not happening like they want it to, and they're honest. There's a blunt and painful honesty that comes with that, and I've experienced that several times, and I don't mind that. You know, it hurts.
Yeah.
You know, you got to kind of drive home, you know, listen to your favorite Coltrane record, wake up and start shedding the next day, you know, maybe with a tear in your eye, but you know, that's part of it. But then there's that other thing where it's like a fucked up power dynamic.
Right.
And that's fucked. You know, that's this other thing. And again, like almost every time that I've encountered that, it's not about the music. It's about some bullshit ego thing.
Right.
And so this is my second point that this all is making me think of, is that there is something about jazz music and, you know, maybe, you know, this maybe the broader tradition of it that we're engaging with that is sort of antithetical to more of a like standard young person's mentality about life, which is that, you know, just by the fact of what we're doing, jazz music operates on a way of respect for generational wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea, like you said, you could still be a young lion at 40, you know. So we kind of operate in this sphere of our lives, at least, on this idea that the people that came before us have wisdom that was passed down to them and should be passed down to us. And you know, hopefully we all aspire to be one link in this broad chain. It's given to us, and we'll pass it on when it's our time to do so. You know, and I think that for a lot of actually very valid reasons, the typical what has become the typical mindset of our generation and people, especially our age, is that no, actually, everything that's coming down at us is fucking bullshit, and that comes, that's coming from a lot of different places, and in a lot of different ways, non-musically speaking, we have been let down by the people that came before us as a culture. I know it's not a politics podcast or whatever, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of, people in their 70s, people in their 80s that are kind of fucking things up and right. have, kind of approached, at least as it has been passed down, feels like as it's been passed down to us, like somewhat selfishly and without this more, without this generosity and this communal wisdom. So I think that there's a feeling among people our age that, that we need to reject that, the knowledge coming down is bad and we need to get rid of that. But then, I think that there is also an element of like, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater sort of a thing. Yeah. And we need to understand, again, the context of why things are the way they are. And I think jazz music can kind of teach us that there's a real profoundness to generational knowledge and wisdom and tradition.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I wouldn't be quite where I am without the people who passed down the knowledge to me, about how to even play. But that's making me think about like kind of when I realized this whole thing, about when I realized that, oh, maybe maybe I shouldn't like reinvent the wheel. Maybe I should like, kind of check out, what Wes was doing, or maybe I should check out what these other guys are doing that I love, George or Scott, or like all these guys, like what are they doing? And I feel like I kind of, it took me a while. Like it was kind of probably like junior, senior year of college to where I kind of really understood, like, because I mean, like most guitar players, I started off on like the rock side of things, and then kind of got into Kurt Rosenwinkel because he kind of bended that gap between fusion and rock, and then he kind of led me into jazz, and then I was like, oh man, and I was really into the Gilad Hexelman for a really long time, which he's a badass, one of the best guitar players in the world for sure. But it was but he is definitely off on his own ship doing his own thing, and his thing is great, and he definitely respects the tradition 100%. Plays a lot of bop in his language too, but it's hard to understand if you just check out someone like that. It's hard to like get the whole picture, totally. And so I think I kind of understood. It clicked more actually when I started studying with Scott, because he, this one really profound moment that I have is like it was kind of what you're talking about. We were playing a duo tune together in the practice room. He was kind of looked at me after the tune. He just kind of stopped me and he's like, man, your comping's not there. And it was just like something so point blank as that. And he's like, man, check out this like Herbie Hancock from Taking Off Empty Pockets. Do you know that tune? Booba did it. Booba dooba deep boo boop.
Oh yeah.
So that record's amazing. But Herbie's comping on there was just like so amazing. Speaking of some of my favorite musicians, Herbie Hancock is
such a receptive and communicative
comper. And then when I got that down, or like had the transcription in there, Scott was like, hell yeah, this guy's serious because he's doing his work. He's trying to get better. He's trying to learn. And then that's like mutual respect that builds between someone who's older and someone who's younger.
It's a relationship.
Yeah.
And I try to tell this to young musicians. I mean, we're young musicians, but I try to tell this to, especially, your whole shit can get fucked up when you're still in college. Because, I'm finishing my grad school right now. So I'm around like 18, 19-year-olds all the time. So which makes me feel like an old ass man. But I'm 26. And then I go out into the real world and people are like, you're a fucking young kid. And, you're all fucked up. You're like, what's going on here?
I feel the same way.
But people, and especially like younger musicians that maybe are still getting their stuff together. And let me just say for the record, I showed up to college as an 18-year-old knowing fucking jack shit. Like I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I still know jack shit. But, like I really had to crawl my way into some level of competency, and and that's been my trajectory, has been like a slow, painful, often existential crawl through the mud.
Yeah.
Just basically like there's this fucking carrot in front of me, and it's like that is like I care deeply about this music, and I'm just like crawling and just trying to figure it out. So I totally understand this thing of younger musicians that are like, I don't fucking know anything. How could I go engage with this community? If I go out, it's going to be embarrassing. And which is a whole other thing of like playing music is very vulnerable. And especially this music where we're improvising and, as silly as it can sound, when you're playing, it can really feel like you're like opening yourself up to the room and being like, I'm here, look at me. And when you in that dissonance of like, oh, it's not happening, or that wasn't good actually, or that feeling is really painful. Dare I say it's cringy.
Yeah.
The feeling of like, oh, I just opened up to this room and it was bad.
Right.
But people are like, well, I can't go out because I'm not there yet. And to what you're saying is it's really, people don't perceive you as just that one time they meet you. People know you through the collective every single time they see you.
Yeah.
So if you show up as a young musician and you can't play, that's fine. People don't really care. What they do care about is that you've shown up every day for a year or as many days as you can.
Right.
And that you've at least gotten better.
Definitely. That also reminds me of when I first got to college, I was 18 at DePaul University, but that was back when Greg Ward was doing the Hungry Brain Jam session.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and me and Alejandro Salazar, do you know him?
I haven't met him yet, no.
Yeah, he's a drummer. He's really talented. I saw his group kind of first when I moved back, but it was amazing. We'll have him on the show at some point. But me and him would always hit the Hungry Brain, and it was when Greg Ward was hosting it, and he would have different bands all the time. And I remember going to that, and I was 18, it was like one of those things where I like, thought I could play, but it was really, I couldn't, what I mean? And like most 18-year-olds who like try to pursue this as a career, you think you're way better than you are until you kind of like hit, till real reality hits you. Yeah. But anyway, like I'm going up there kind of like, but that's the thing about jazz, I feel like too, is that like the less you know, the more confident you are. Like
I know what you mean.
Like the more
ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, right. Ignorance is bliss type of idea. Like if you don't understand that there's a language to this music, then you think it's everyone just kind of go up there and improvising. Then you're gonna go up there and just like have a good time because you don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean?
Isn't it funny how half-assed musicians seem to have way more fun than we do sometimes?
Yeah. And that's a real thing, that's 100% a real thing. I mean, coming from Nashville where like people would come up there and sing like "What a Wonderful World" or whatever and just like have a beautiful time when they don't really know what they're doing. But all the power to them. Like if they're having fun, I'm having fun. It's all.
That's almost the trap.
Yeah.
It can be the trap of it when you start to get deeper. I mean, it's almost like the big brain, like that meme with the brain that keeps expanding. It's like the little one is like, don't know everything, have a fucking amazing time being ass at my instrument. And then the second level is I am deeply ashamed of everything I play because I now know a little bit. Yeah. And then you go up with the line, and then the final nirvanic state is, I am constantly striving to get better, but I can still enjoy playing music.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Definitely. But anyway, I was gonna say that I used to go to the Brain all the time and play. And there was like, I remember specific times where like, they used to have this tiny little amp at the Brain that would feed back all the time if you got too loud. And I was playing one time and it was like I was way too loud. I was standing like the amp was like in front of me, and I was like playing way too loud. And like Greg came up and was just like basically was like, man, when you hear it feeding back, you need to turn it down. And was kind of stern with me about it, but also kind of supportive. Yeah. And like I remember kind of leaving like feeling like, how one feels after they get yelled at by someone they really respect. And then like I came back next week and it was all good. But like fast forward 7 years, I'm 25 now, it's like, you know, Greg and had kept a great relationship with him. We played a couple gigs together at the Port Show in 2020, and I went to his jam sessions and gigs a bunch between there, and we've probably hung out and seen him play, like, I don't know, a good 75 times, I'd say, maybe younger than that. I mean, like, I've seen him play a bunch in his,
he's one of the
not
baddest
that much
alto players,
probably
in the world.
around like 40 times. Probably I've seen his band play or play with him. But anyway, fast forward to like the Chicago Jazz Fest, like he comes up to me, dabs me up, it's like, where you been, man? I'm like, oh man, just moved back to town. He's like, oh, great to have you back, like let's hang soon, you know. And like someone that I respect like that, like Greg Ward, to say something like that to me, and it's like having those little experiences. Like I doubt he remembers coming up to me and telling me to turn my amp down. Not at all, you know. But I remember that, and I remember like how much I just like learned from that. It's like now I was just like, oh shit, like I didn't realize that my amp was too loud. Now I know like to keep my levels great. But above and beyond that, I think I got some wisdom from someone who was older than me, and I respected, and he saw that I listened to him and respected what he said, and it turned into a awesome relationship. Absolutely. That we will, like, you know, hopefully play a lot together in the future, you know?
Yeah.
But I can't remember what brought me there, but yeah.
I'm pretty sure, you know, like half an hour ago you asked me who my favorite saxophone player was, and somehow we ended up here. Man, do you want to play another tune? I feel like
we can play another tune. Yes, let's play another tune. We'll wrap it up here in a little bit. Wait, no, I guess we got some more time.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I'd be down to play and keep talking too.
Yeah,
so,
let's play a little quick one and keep talking. All right, what are you thinking?
I don't know, your podcast is called Let's Cool One.
Yes, it is called Let's Cool One. So should we play that one?
I mean, that seems right to me.
Yes. All right, let's do it.
1, 2, 1, Beautiful, man.
Yeah, you too, man. That's a great tune and great tune to name the podcast after.
Yeah, man. Well, I feel like here. Let me get closer to the mic. But I feel like, I think I would be remiss to. You were talking about tenor players, man, and like, so
I could hear that Johnny Griffin.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I wanted to say is that like, it's been cool to move to Chicago. So most of my development happened in Detroit, Michigan. And I love Detroit,
which is also a beautiful town for musicians.
Beautiful town. It's a soulful place. Pin in everything that I'm about to say that says everything I have at all is owed to the wonderful music community and amazing, melting pot of humanity that is Detroit, Michigan. I love it so much. I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks. To me, that will always be home. But it's been so great to move to Chicago, partly because I think I just click so much with the Chicago tenor tradition. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of for me, it's impossible to play that tune without thinking about Johnny Griffin. Right. Mysterioso record with Monk is just so huge to me. I mean, that's
so killing. Well, I think Johnny takes like 3 unaccompanied choruses on there.
Totally. I almost wanted to be like, I got it.
Right. Which for anyone who doesn't know needs to check that out right now.
Yeah, that is it's the record of records, man. I mean, any Monk is good. But like, there's Johnny Griffin. We talked about Clifford Jordan. You mentioned Von Freeman. I mean, Von Freeman, like, I didn't know anything about Von Freeman before I moved here. And then people were talking about it. So I'm like, let me check this out. And I was like, holy fucking shit. This is some. Yeah. I mean, whose time feels like that? Like, and I feel it's so sad to me that like I'll never get to hear that sound in person because like almost more than any other musician that I could think of, it seems like there was like so much character to that sound that just can never be captured by recording.
Yeah. No, apparently, I mean, I only know this from Mike Alamana, but like apparently apartment lounge jam where Vaughn was having his thing. I mean, this is only told by legend because we're both in our mid-20s,
Right.
so it's like we weren't around to experience this. But like we were talking about earlier, we have mentors who toss down these stories to us, and hopefully we're supposed to continue these lives of these stories. But anyway, apparently the apartment lounge jam session, everyone, like so many people would come there and play and love Vaughn. I mean, the Roy used to go there all the time, and he loved Vaughn.
Yeah.
Roy Hargrove, that is. And he would always, Mike would always talk about how Roy would just like love Vaughn and all his music, how there was so many amazing musicians that come down and hung there. And yeah, and Vaughn Freeman grew up with Gene Ammons, and they have records together,
Right.
you know. And so it's like Gene Ammons is part of Chicago, like Ahmad Jamal Live at the Pershing was recorded here in Chicago. You know,
Miles Davis Live at the Black Hawk.
Right.
Or not Black Hawk. The Plug Nickel.
Yeah, I mean, Coltrane Cannibal Live in Chicago.
Yeah.
You know, like there's so
much history.
So many. It goes on and on and on. But yeah, like Chicago has so much history and such a great place. Yeah, such a strong tenor saxophone history as well.
And that's what I was gonna say is like for the tenor saxophone in particular, like, you know, it's like, man, there's a fucking vibe, and that vibe is something that I'm really interested in. I would say, like, you know, it's interesting when we talk about the tenor saxophone about what it is supposed to sound like or what are the various sound concepts, and it's gone in so many different directions over the years. You know, obviously early on Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, there's these two schools, and then it kind of splinters off later when you get the beboppers, you get Sonny Rollins, your Hank Mobley's, Train comes along, sends it in this whole other direction. And speaking of influences, man, I mean, I think I can say pretty unequivocally, hearing Benny Golson on Moanin', the Art Blakey record, changed my life.
Oh yeah.
You know, and that's one of those sounds that's like so deeply in that Don Byas, Coleman Hawkins thing that like is this whole other school of thought. And then, you know, now you have these modern players like your Mark Turner comes to mind as someone who's really changed the sound of the horn. And
that's the record where they play like Along Came Betty. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was just checking that out the other day. Actually, I was hanging at Hyde Park Jazz Fest after that. Dave Miller, Christian Dillingham, and Kyle Swan and I all went to Christian's house, and we were hanging over there, and I was like, hell yes, I'm down for the hang, let's go. But Christian had this wonderful like sound system, and I guess there's over in this direction there's a recording place called Pro Musica.
Yeah.
I guess the guy at Pro Musica has all these like vinyl, straight off the vinyl, like collection that he digitized or something.
Wow.
And he like sent Christian all these digitized copies of these vinyls, and he has this beautiful sound system. And he played Moanin'.
Yeah.
And we were just like hanging and listening to Moanin', like the whole record, and it sounded like the band was in the room. It was ridiculous the way that the audio quality was.
Well, that's a great sounding record regardless. So I can only imagine, like, you know, and I love that period of recording because it's like that's right around when they finally cracked the code and like the full what feels like the full character of those sounds started to really translate. Into recording.
But I was gonna say that like Blues March is on there, but Along Came Betty, when that played, I haven't like actually listened to the Along Came Betty from that record, and I'm like, wow, this like tempo is like way chiller than I thought it was, you know, because everyone plays that tune so fast.
People play songs way fucking more fast than they're supposed to be played, and that's a whole other old man yells at cloud kind of thing. But like I mean, what a great record, what great writing. And then again, Benny Golson's sound. And I think it's kind of interesting to me because I think you meet a lot of different kind of musicians, and certain people have, and I think that we kind of click on this level in that when I think of you, I think of someone that loves the sound of the guitar. Yeah. Like you're enamored with the instrument. And I've met various other guitar players who are great friends of mine and whose playing I respect deeply, who are like, I don't really like the sound of guitar. Like I'm trapped on this instrument trying to get this other thing. And that's really deep and profound to me on another level. but I think that maybe we are the same in that. For me, I love the sound of the tenor saxophone.
Yeah.
Like, there's something that about it, and I love all the other instruments too. I mean, man, I was listening to Freddie on Empyrean Isles yesterday, and like his sound on like Aliloquy Valley or even the original Cantaloupe Island, like it pierces your soul.
One finger snap.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, you know, I feel very connected to all these other sounds, but there's something so profound about like the warmth and the beauty of the tenor saxophone to me. Like the way that, like, you know, it could kind of get this like but then also this like this really intense thing. Like, I feel very connected to that. And when I think about those Chicago tenor saxophone players, Gene Ammons, Johnny Griffin, Von Freeman, Clifford Jordan, they just all have such deep sound concepts that are all very unique. You know, I notice like, and I mean, part of this is that, and I'm not trying to say that I have a unique sound concept, but I think that it's interesting to hear a lot of players out in the wild, not even like not on the highest level, because I think every high level jazz musician has developed a unique and personal sound. You mentioned Greg Ward, Mark Turner has like such a deep and beautiful sound, but a lot of young players seem to not really care as much about sound, or I don't know what that is, but like, you know, to me, like sound and texture is so deeply important. And like, I mean, that's what I love about like Ornette Coleman and like Wayne Shorter and, you know, Sonny Rollins, is that they're like on this quest for the perfect sound. Yeah. And like, I heard a Yusuf Lateef solo on a Cannonball record, and he plays this, he comes in with like the like he plays this, it almost veers into microtonality, which is not surprising for Yusuf Lateef. And it's like, holy shit, that's it. Yeah. You know, if it's these musicians that if they could just find that one perfect sound, that perfect note in that solo or in that performance, then it seems like that's enough. And I really, really admire musicians where sound is such an important part of their musical
for
world.
For sure. I did a couple things that you mentioned. Coleman Hawkins, and he's one of my favorite tenors ever. Oh, yeah. You know, and a couple weeks ago we've been doing this thing on the podcast where we'll do a record of the week, and we had I don't know if you checked out Monk's Music, that record.
Oh yeah, where he's in the wagon.
Yeah, and
it's like Epistrophes on there.
Yeah, it's Epistrophe and
is Ruby My Dear.
Ruby My Dear. Yeah, that was the song I was going to bring up. Crepsicle with Nelly, Abide by Me, which is one of the tracks on there.
It's like a hymn, right?
Yeah, it's like a hymn, Monk arranged, and you can hear Coltrane and Coleman Hawkins trying to blend on there. It's amazing because you can hear each instrument individually, and like the way that, you just guys have to check that out. Yeah. But anyway, it's so interesting to me hearing that Ruby My Dear on there, because that's like, I think one of Monk's first recordings of that tune, if not the first.
It's definitely the most famous.
Yeah, and it's one of his most famous tunes. But Coleman Hawkins is the tenor on there.
I don't think so. I think it's Coltrane, right?
It's Coltrane's later. Which is wild, and that's why I was one of the biggest reasons why it was the record of the week, is because Coleman Hawkins plays Ruby My Dear, and then you can obviously tell that Coltrane's like chilling in the studio, kind of taking it all in from the master. You know, it's like he's like, oh my god, like Coleman is playing the shit out of this right now. Yeah, and then like years later, Coltrane records it on Monk and Coltrane.
Okay. So, all right, I have my dates mixed. That's really interesting. I'll have to go back and check that out. Yeah,
check it out, because I was gonna say, like, you know, you can, you know, Coltrane has many influences like Dexter and some other cats, but you can obviously tell that he's just soaking it up from Coleman, because Coleman's one of those guys that like bebop was kind of invented when he was already like a established professional. You know, he was already well into his 40s or 50s by the time like Charlie Parker was playing his stuff.
Right.
You know, and he's one of the most profound musicians to me because he adapted to all these new types of styles of playing.
I mean, he's right. It's really interesting with Coleman Hawkins, especially because he was like right there on early Monk stuff, early Dizzy stuff, like, you know, Woody and You and stuff. Like, yeah, and it's really interesting. And I think that's when you talk about younger musicians not really respecting the past, kind of a thing. I think it's interesting to keep in mind that those bebop musicians had a deep respect for the swing guys.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a really, you know, another favorite tenor saxophonist of mine is Eddie Lockshot Davis, who's played with Count Basie.
Another Chicago guy.
Yeah, has all those records with Johnny Griffin.
Yeah.
And I think Eddie might actually be a Texas tenor.
Really?
I'm pretty sure, but so you might be able to fact check me on that. But you know, there, in that Miles autobiography, Miles says something really telling, which is that when Sonny Rollins was on the gig, you know, he could kind of fuck off. But when Eddie Lockjaw Davis was on the gig, they had to play their shit. You know,
why is that?
Because Eddie was the older guy. You know, he was this swing musician, this older swing guy that was an elder. Like he literally ran the session at Minton's, and I think that really knocked me out. And I feel like contextually, you know, we kind of lose sight of that the bebop guys still had this deep reverence and respect for the music that came before.
Doesn't really say. That's all right. Where Eddie was from?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but go ahead.
But all I'm trying to say is that the beboppers really had like a deep reverence and respect for the swing music. And it wasn't so much of, I mean, there was this new thing that they were kind of putting together, but it was all part of it. Like, it wasn't like, hey, we're done with swing. We're done with these older guys. No, I mean, it was all just happening urgently and in the moment.
Definitely.
And all at the same time. You
know, there's that, one of my favorite records, I'm sure yours too, is the Oscar Peterson trio plus Lester Young.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's like one of the prime examples of like how, you know, because I would say that record is pretty like swing era type of stuff with early hints of bebop maybe, but like still pretty swing, you know, oriented.
Well, you got Lester on there. I want to say that record is like early 50s.
Yeah.
Well, that's a whole other interesting conversation about the relationship between Oscar
40s,
Peterson
maybe.
And bebop, and was Oscar Peterson playing bop? I'm not qualified to have that conversation, but I did have a great conversation with Reggie Thomas about it once, about how, you know, you kind of have to take Oscar and look at his music kind of as a different thing, you know, because he was famously like averse to Bud Powell.
Yeah.
You know, and there's like a whole relationship there. But that, I mean, when you're talking about a great feeling rhythm section on that record, and you got Lester Young just playing some crushing stuff. Like they play
T for Two, or
there's a Sunny Side of the Street off of that record.
Street, right.
And they get to the bridge, and instead of playing the melody, Lester plays like a and like I can hear, like it's one of those things that I can hear in my head, and it really, really has impacted me. Like just that perfect sound, like, you know, it still has the tune, and it takes this tune and like it makes it feel so sad. Yeah, it's so melancholy, just with his inflection and with his sound and with the depth of feeling, and like, man, that's everything.
Totally. Yeah, so if you guys don't know that record, Lester Young and our Oscar Peterson trio plus Lester Young, definitely check that out. That's some shit you won't be.
Yeah, and I definitely, if people are listening and I want to check out some Lester Young, I would also encourage people to check out the early Lester stuff with Count Basie, specifically the recordings of Old Lady Be Good, Shoe Shine Boy, like Lester Leaps In, because it's talk about a musician that changed over time. You know, by the early 50s with that record, which was definitely the first Lester that I heard, very vulnerable, very, very open, and, you know, playing in this this kind of breathy style. But those early records, I think Lester gets slept on for his influence on like adapting Louis Armstrong's time feel to the tenor saxophone, which was then heard by Charlie Parker, and really is a direct predecessor. You know, you hear him on Shoeshine Boy, is like
Sounds like Louis, yeah.
And it's really right up on the beat, and it's this killing eighth note, you know, which I don't think gets talked about, is that Lester Young had fucking killing eighth note.
Yeah.
Especially,
yeah.
I mean, always, but especially early on in his career. And
super on, too. Super
on the beat.
Yeah. Like, super there. You know, I mean, like, obviously, like, someone who's not super on is, like, Bobby Broom. You know, he's super, like, it almost feels like he can do whatever he wants. You know, sometimes he's way on top, sometimes he's way behind, sometimes he's like doing whatever.
He's so grounded.
But it's just like a total different approach, you know, to like where you hear Lester Young play like that. It's like almost, I mean, equally as impressive to play like Lester, where you're like super on, as it is to like be so malleable to where you're like in front and behind, you know. And I feel like, you know, you can't do one without the other. You know what I mean?
Well, and you look at Lester, and then towards the end of his career, like that Oscar Peters record is definitely kind of veering into that other territory. You know, and Bobby, I mean, Bobby Broom is someone who I certainly look at as someone who is, you know, on the eternal quest for that perfect note.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
You know, his melodic sensibilities are so idiosyncratic and so him. Like, you know, not that I'm the person that knows the most about the tradition of the electric guitar, but I see Bobby Broom as like a torchbearer of the West Montgomery Charlie Christian thing.
Yeah, I mean, totally. There's not that many guitar players that are nowadays. I mean, Russell Malone was one.
Yeah,
but he unfortunately just passed away. I mean, the other ones are Rodney Jones. You know, Tim Fitzgerald is kind of slowly becoming one, in my opinion. And
but Tim's great.
Yeah, he's amazing. And, you know, he's like like I said, he's a young lion even though he's in his 40s. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or maybe even older than that. But, like, his trio is like, he plays like a regular gig here on Wednesdays in Chicago, but he's like in Korea touring now, which is amazing.
Is that? Oh, really?
Yeah, he's like, he brought him, Neil, and Tom Vaitzis.
No kidding.
Yeah, they're in Korea. They're playing like in Japan for like the next 2 weeks, playing gigs there. And it's just like, it's so sick because it's like, man, he's popping off at like age of whatever, 40, whatever he is, you know, and like still practicing really hard, still trying to define his sound, define his tone.
Totally.
And I feel like that's just so awesome and like very inspiring for a young musician because it's like, man, like, you know, this cat never gave up, or like this cat, you know, is like continually working on his thing, you know, and like now he's like just a regular guy. I mean, not regular guy, but a regular guy who's like going on these tours in Korea now and just like worked really hard and like really loved the music and really loved the guitar. And it's just like, it's so inspiring to me at least because it's like, oh man, there's so much potential, you know, with this music, you know, for it to take you places, for it to make you give you opportunities to play with your heroes.
And so many different paths.
Right.
You know, I think that speaks to this idea that, you know, just because you're not getting picked up by, you know, Kenny Barron when you're 17 or whatever, or maybe you're not even burning at 25, you know, you're still putting the pieces together. You're not done.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
It's, you know, it's passion plus perseverance plus time, you know, and it is showing up every day and not giving up. Like, the world wants you to give up. The world fucking hates you for being a jazz musician, you know, because our entire world is set up to not value the things that we value, you know, commitment to something that isn't necessarily conducive to financial gain, you know, a deep and reverential respect for the wisdom of the people that came before us, commitment to community above, you know, personal financial whatever, you know, a rejection of a certain 9 to 5 you know, nuclear family lifestyle. You know, these are all aspects of what it is to be a musician. It is a very deliberate, I think, rejection of a lot of these things. And certainly, I think once you start to get to our age, which is 25, 26, you're getting out of the bubble of college and of your late teens. You're starting to realize, man, the world is not set up to support us.
No,
we have to fucking fight to eke out an existence, and we're gonna keep doing it because that's the profoundness of our love for this music.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, that's one of the biggest reasons for me why Chicago is such the right place for me right now, is because I mean, even though it's like you're talking about how the world is, it's not really conducive for a jazz musician, but you know, there are these amazing things that the Chicago community has set up for musicians, like Englewood Jazz Festival, Chicago Jazz Festival, Hyde Park Jazz Festival, like Lumen Arts grants, things like that, but that don't really exist a lot of other places, you know, and that's why I'm so thankful to be a part of the Chicago community and be from this area, is because I kind of leaving this area makes you kind of realize how special it was, you know, and how special it is here, you know, and I feel like that's something that goes understated a lot, is like how amazing the community is here. And like we were saying earlier, to wrap it back up to that Green Mill show we saw, like with Dennis and Reggie and George, it's like that rhythm section is like some of the best players in the world, you know, like we were saying earlier. And it's like, yeah, you can put like, you know, Kenny Washington and Peter Washington up there as like a great rhythm section. You could put Joe Farnsworth up there, but like honestly, like a lot of those guys who've been like that, like they haven't been playing together like George Flutis and Dennis have for 30, 40 years.
Yeah, because it's a working city.
You know, like New York, it's like, you know, they play together a lot, but it's a working city. It's where people constantly change. But Chicago is like, you know, big and small enough to where you can have those relationships like that with someone for years and years, and continue playing with how George and Dennis have been playing since the beginning Bobby Broom Trio in the early 90s, you know? And what's that? That's like 35, almost 40 years, you know?
Which that's like ridiculous. Even in New York, I mean, anywhere, the best relationships are going to be the ones forged over time and consistently. You know, as you know, back in the day, you know, 50s, 60s, people were doing week, 2 weeks, months, summer-long residencies with one band. That's how you forge a sound and build a relationship. And I think what you're saying is so true, and something that actually somewhat ties Detroit and Chicago together to me is that they're both cities where you can live as a musician. You know, you can live in a relatively affordable life in an urban setting and be working consistently. And that creates something really beautiful. It kind of it's to me kind of, you know, it doesn't foster as much like aggressive hustler energy as like a New York or a Los Angeles does, where people are constantly self-promoting themselves in this way that to me can sometimes feel a little dark. You know, instead people are like, you know, there's that Midwest kind of a vibe where people are like, no, we're just out here. We're just doing our thing. And it's so familial and so beautiful that, you know, the scene is constantly letting in new people. It's constantly letting people develop and mature with time. Some people leave and come back, you know, all these different things. And I know what you mean. It really creates a special musical atmosphere that I feel very lucky to be on the ground floor of kind of entering into this community.
Absolutely. Just super blessed here, and we're going to keep on grinding. Well, Ryan, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. And is there anything you want to shout out? Any gigs, any music you got out, anything like that you want to kind of give a shout out for the people?
Not too much. I'm playing at Ina May in Wicker Park this coming Sunday. But I guess if I have one thing I'd like to shout out is I'd like to, you know, just shout out all of my mentors and friends and family and people, you know, Wendell Harrison, Russ Miller, Vincent Chandler, Rob Pifo in Detroit, Scott Gwinnell, Steve Wood. I'm just going to start naming people. Steve Wood, James Hughes,
awesome. Do it.
Keith Kaminsky, Paul Keller, Matt LaRusso, Nolan Young. I'm fucking forgetting people already. But people here in Chicago, like, you know, my my specific mentors right now, Jeff Bradfield, Bobby Broom, Reggie Thomas, but also, you know, Isaiah Spencer, Dustin Lorenzi, Ted Sirota, Katie Ernst, you know, all these people, Clark Summers, people that I've gotten to meet and I'm starting to build this relationship with. It's such a special thing, and I feel so deeply indebted to even people that I've just had like a couple conversations, like Clark Summers comes to mind. Like I've just gotten to have like a couple brief conversations with him, but it's just like I've heard him play a bunch now, and I'm like, wow, you know, whether you know it or not, Clark, this is starting to feel like, wow, you're such a, like, I'm so inspired by you.
Yeah,
and I feel
he's a badass. Well, yeah, Ryan, thank you for coming on the show, man. And yeah, Ryan and I will be playing some shows soon, so we'll shout that out on here. But who are you playing with on Sunday?
I'm with Stefan Lethy's trio. So it'll be me.
Oh, bass player?
Yeah, me, Stefan,
Cool.
and the drummer Christian Hidranto.
Oh, I love Christian. He's cool, man.
He's awesome.
We've played before. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and peace, everybody. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Yeah. My dude.